Hello, my name is T.L. Goodwin, and I'm an artist. I have a particular fascination with a man-child named Matt Powell. Matt Powell is a follower of Kent Hovind, and if you know anything about Kent Hovind thinks that mankind walked with dinosaurs. In fact, he has a place called Dinosaur Adventureland, USA. He got kicked out of one state, only to go to another one. There's a lot of controversy around him. And Matt Powell is one of his disciples, I guess you'd call him. He's equally unsmart, or not very smart, or stupid. And time after time, this man-child has been told the counter arguments that he's about ready to make, to the counter to the arguments he's about ready to make. He thinks that the flood of Noah was real, and he's going to go about showing you, without showing you one shred of real evidence for any of it. He's also going to assert that Adam and Eve are real, and that Jesus something. I don't know. But none of this is proven, and he's not doing a good job of proving anything. And here we go. If you haven't heard of him, well, you're not that lucky anymore.
A lot of people are under the impression that Noah's flood never happened. And if you tell people that you believe in biblical creationism, sometimes they will laugh at you. But let me tell you.
Okay, first of all, let me tell you, they're going to laugh at you because, like the idea of the earth being flat, there is absolutely no proof, but proof to the contrary.
Biblical creationism and Noah's flood are two verifiable things that you can show to be accurate.
No, not at all. You can't, and you will fail this time too. Matt's made more than one video on this subject, and each time he makes a video on this subject, he's like trolling science. You know what I mean? Scientific people, scientific-minded people, people who are against the idea of a young Earth. He is himself a young Earth creationist. He thinks that the Earth was created 6,500 years ago, which is impossible. If you were to think about how long it takes uranium to decay into lead, you would know that it has to take a lot longer than 6,500 years ago. So, but you know, God created Adam and Eve about that time ago, and the reason that they know that is because, of course, they've counted out the generations since Adam and Eve, and so that's how they established the age of the Earth. Because they believe that the Earth was created in 6 days. They also believe that the Big Bang is a form of magic, and yet their idea of Sky Daddy creating the Earth is in no way a form of magic, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But anyway, that's not covered in this video.
In this video, I'm going to give you 10 reasons why Noah's flood is a fact.
No. You're not going to give us 10 reasons that it's a fact. In fact, you're not going to give us even one.
One is because you find sea life on every single mountain.
You do not find sea life on every single mountain. You do find sea life on some mountains, and how that sea life got there was because it was probably not a volcanic mountain, but a mountain created through upthrust. Like the Himalayas, like the Olympics, like the Wenatchee Mountains, and on and on. There are a number of examples of mountain ranges that were created by continental thrust, and by collision of continental plates, and therefore thrust. So There used to be shallow seas over most of North America, and it definitely was the case with the Himalayas. So you're going to find seashells at the top of these mountains because they used to not be mountains. But that was a long time ago, a lot longer than 6,500 years ago. It would not be possible in his world. So of course he believes that it didn't happen because it's not his world. His world is 6,500 years old, and it took a cataclysm to push clams and oysters and whatnot on the tops of mountains.
There are entire whales that we find perfectly preserved on top of mountains.
Because those mountains were once shallow seas and they weren't mountains at all. Okay, so far you're not doing very well there, buddy.
We also find gigantic oysters, some as big as cars on the Andes Mountains. How did they get there? And not to mention, these oysters are often sealed shut, and they were not even able to open when they died.
Dude, catastrophes have occurred throughout time. We've been slammed by asteroids at least twice, maybe 3 or more times. It caused devastating extinctions throughout the planet. There are catastrophic events, but Noah's flood wasn't one of them.
As oysters and clams normally do. Evidence number 2 would be polystrata fossils. Think about it, we find trees that are...
Polystrata fossils is something that he's created, I think. Polystrata fossils. I think he's created that to describe trees that transverse more than one strata layer. Not sure how this happens. I've had it explained to me, and so is Matt for that matter, but Matt refuses to see the real explanation. Instead, he thinks that the strata was laid down while the trees were erect, even though he's about ready to tell you that some of them were found upside down.
Or upside down in some cases, that are penetrating multiple layers of the geologic column. Now, if these layers slowly accumulated over millions of years, why is it that you have a tree that connects many of these layers?
Your idea that it's a proof that there was a flood, just, Noah's flood in particular, is kind of out the window. You don't really have that proof. Not only that, but it's entirely possible for a tree to stand upright and anyway have flooding occur around it. It serves as support for his idea, but no other idea, and his idea isn't really terribly supported.
That means that the layers are an identical age, because trees aren't just going to stand there for millions of years waiting to be...
No, but they could for hundreds, and so far you've never shown us a tree that extends like an entirely tree high. Do you know what I mean? You ain't done it. You've only showed us parts of trees. You see this one here is cut off. The one right here. And here you see only parts of the trees. You don't see the whole tree. So there is that.
Be fossilized as sediment layers are slowly forming around them. It tells us that these trees were placed there by a cataclysmic process and not by slow and gradual change.
That might be. It might be a catastrophic process, but it is in no way can be determined that it was the flood of Noah.
Change in the Earth's crust. My third piece of evidence would be coal seams. Some of them are actually over 100 feet thick. Now, coal is made up of vegetation and swamp material and plants and trees that get smashed together between sediments. That's how coal is formed. And so in order to get a seam that's over 100 feet thick, you would have to have a globally cataclysmic event.
No such need. All you have to do is have an environment that's really lush and full of intense vegetation for a long period of time. Like, let's say, like a bog or a swamp. And in fact, that's exactly what they have determined that by the nature of the material and the leaf imprints, etc., found in these places, that they were once indeed just massive swamplands going on for hundreds of years, not amassed by some form of flood within the idea or within the time frame of 6,000 years ago.
To be able to create such coal seams. The fourth piece of evidence would be rock arches.
Rock arches are in no way indicative of a global flood, because if there was a global flood, those rock arches would have been knocked down, quite simply. Instead, they're the last remnants of cave systems, etc., or places in which the rock was harder than the surrounding rock. It has nothing to do with flooding at all. In fact, it's a support that there wasn't a global flood, if you would, because, as I said, all of these rock arches would have been knocked down. He's going to present an idea where it's gravity, that gravity hasn't worked or something in enough time.
Think about it. Rocks are actually breaking down. This mountain that's behind me is being broken down by gravity over time. Gravity is causing everything to erode flat.
Except, of course, for those things that are harder than the surrounding rock, in which case that's not going to happen. But eventually, it will happen, exactly as you said. Those arches will cease to exist. As in our lifetime, several famous arches have been destroyed. Some of them at the hand of human beings, some of them by nature. This will continue to happen throughout time, as new rock arches most likely will form.
Could rock arches have been standing for millions and millions of years without crumbling down?
Well, no, because, chances are no, because, they're standing, but they weren't always rock arches. Do you know what I mean? It's not proof at all of Noah's flood.
From gravity? The answer is no. These rock arches were formed in the recent past by
You have no proof that they were formed in the recent past whatsoever.
Noah's flood, by a
particularly by any form of flood.
Globally cataclysmic event. And that's why they're still standing today, is because they were placed there in the recent past. They were formed in the recent history of the planet, and not millions and millions of years ago. My fifth piece of evidence would be hoodoos. Hoodoos are rock spires that often have very little debris at the bottom of them. Now, is it possible?
He's going to give us a weird idea, I think. It has to do with the flood. Well, no, but it has to do with raining and the wear of limestone material and how easy it is for limestone to be worn away. These caps that are on top are harder than the rock below it, and so they don't wear from underneath nearly as fast as they do where the rock isn't as hard. That's a hoodoo. Hoodoos can be relatively short in creation themselves, but you can see by these photos that we're looking at limestone. If you know anything about geology at all, you know that this is limestone and that those caps are harder. It's quite simple. And that some of them have lost their caps. You can actually see their caps down below.
That these structures could be sitting there for millions of years and not have come crumbling down from gravity.
Again, eventually gravity will take them down. Gravity just hasn't taken them down now. Keep going, you still don't have any proof.
Wouldn't these rocks have eventually broken down and become completely flat with the Earth's crust?
They will eventually do that. They will fall. It's that simple.
If millions of years of time were what had allowed them to be placed there. Let me tell you something. What placed these rock spires there, these hoodoos, was a globally cataclysmic event that happened in the recent past. Noah's flood is a fact of geology.
Noah's flood is not a fact of geology. You, in fact, have absolutely zero proof of Noah's flood. You have yet to make a case.
And the reason that we know that is because of these things that we are now observing in science that you can test.
Whose science? It sure the hell isn't science's science. It must be Christian science. And what the hell is that anyway? It has absolutely nothing to do with reality whatsoever, because if it did, you wouldn't believe in a fucking fantasy. I mean, quite simply. None of the things that you believe have any proof whatsoever. It's just people going around saying, look at the proof in this book.
And verify to be true. My sixth piece of evidence would be mountains themselves. Many mountain ranges are made of bent rock.
All right. Have you ever taken Charleston chew and tried to bend it? If you go really slow, you can bend it. If you go really fast, you're going to snap it. You're going to crack it. You're going to break it. Same thing. And don't ever underestimate the power of heat and pressure, okay? Especially when you're talking about working on geologic folds. It has absolutely zero to do with the idea of there being some kind of catastrophic flood. Though you're going to say that you think it was because these layers were laid down wet. You have no proof of that. None.
Now, according to Darwinists,
Wait a minute. You just said Darwinists. A person that believes in evolution is not a Darwinist. In fact, there are no Darwinists these days. There are just people who believe in evolution. And the reason that they believe in evolution is because they looked at the evidence for evolution. The evidence of evolution is all around you if you know where to look. You have caused selective breeding, which is a form of evolution. You've been a part of it. Your ancestors have been a part of it. You are the product of selective breeding, if you would. Therefore, you are the product of evolution. In only a short period of time, even. You know what, Matt? I wish you'd post the results of your genetic tests so we would find out exactly how much Neanderthal you are, because if there's any at all, it's the result of evolution.
plates are moving 1 to 2 inches per year, and it causes mountains to
I hope I find Neanderthal genes if I get tested.
slowly get formed. But if that were true, how is it that you have mountains that are made up of bent rocks? You cannot bend hard rock. It will break. It will
All of these layers of strata that you're going to show in your photographs, or that you have showed in the photographs of bent strata, contain innumerable fractures, filled or otherwise.
shatter. What it means is that these layers would have had to have...
This is an absolutely beautiful example, but you can't tell me that these rocks are not shattered, cracked, crazed, what have you. We see evidence of the breakage right along the line, everywhere. So don't give me that crap about it being formed in a catastrophic flood.
all been pliable all at the same time. And
even if so, what supplied the pressure above the right-hand side in this case and not the left-hand side in this case? Was it water? Huh?
pushed up rapidly through...
The hand of God came down and pushed upon the land, causing these great folds. Or Satan formed them in order to mislead you.
through plate tectonics, and that's how you have mountains that are still standing today and in those positions, because all...
And yet he doesn't understand why seashells are found at the top of mountains. And it's funny because this is not his first time posting something about Noah's flood, and evolution for that matter. It's not the first time. He's been doing this for years. And for years, people have been looking at his videos and responding to his videos, much like I'm doing right now, for the same points as I'm doing right now. So in effect, I'm not doing anything new here at all. I'm just pointing out what a fool he is to think the things that he thinks that are not supported by science over and over and over again, even though people who know what the hell they're talking about have talked about these very same things to Matt Powell. And you'd think that by now Matt would understand why there are seashells at the top. I mean, so many people have explained this to him.
all of those layers were pliable during their formation. It's not that slow and gradual change in the Earth's crust caused mountains to be formed.
I mean, look at Sir Sick, okay? Professor Dave, okay? These are only a couple of examples. There are many, many more.
Number 7 would be sharks that are buried with dinosaurs in the center of the United States.
There is nowhere in the United States or anywhere in the world where sharks and dinosaurs are buried together. You might find a localized sort of area, let's say the state of Wyoming or Montana or California, that may have dinosaur bones. Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, they might have dinosaur bones and they might have shark teeth, but that doesn't mean that you're finding shark's teeth with dinosaur bones. Hey, I'm surprised that he hasn't brought up human footprints found alongside the dinosaurs in this video. He has been known to do that too, which is a page right out of his mentor, Kent Hovind, Dinosaur Adventureland USA scam.
How is it possible that a wave of water could hit the center of the United States and be able to
It never happened.
bury hundreds of thousands of different animals with sea life, sharks, dinosaurs, and so on and so forth?
No, these were isolated events. They weren't the same event. And you've been told that many, many times, and you've been shown the proof, and yet you still ramble on.
All a dead center
As if
of
you
the
know
US.
what you're talking about.
That means there would have been a globally catastrophic
No.
flood that would have been able to hit the center of the United States with waves from the oceanic coast.
Which oceanic coast is that? The Atlantic Oceanic coast, the Pacific Oceanic coast? Is this before the mountains, the Rocky Mountains were made, or definitely not before the Appalachians? So what the are you talking about? Let me explain. Just really briefly. Most of those territories that we're talking about that are in the middle of the United States, okay, were part of a shallow sea. Hence, you're going to find sea life examples. And for a time, they were above water, where you're going to find some dinosaur fossils, okay? So, it didn't happen at the same time, man.
Number 8, we find whales in the desert.
All right, yes, the Sahara, because once the Sahara was also covered by a shallow sea, in which the whales were living, the same time as the dinosaurs, okay? Then after that, it became an oasis, if you would, a jungle, okay? And then after that, it became a desert. So these things, over time, these land masses over time have changed.
How did they get there? How do you get whale fossils that are preserved? Because remember, a fossil has to be rapidly buried by sediment in order to be preserved. How do you get it in the Sahara Desert? The answer
wasn't always the
that
desert.
a globally
That's
catastrophic flood called Noah's flood.
No, not at all. And if they were deposited by a catastrophic flood, you'd think that the power of the flood would have been enough to have destroyed all of those skeletons long before they became fossilized. You'd find individual little bits of bone here and there, but you definitely wouldn't find entire creatures. Think about it. You can't even find an entire frickin' creature on the beach without it eroding into a bunch of parts in very little time.
Flood actually happened and placed whales in the Sahara Desert that we're now finding later on as we do scientific research. Number 9, fossils.
As who does science fiction or scientific research? It isn't you. It isn't the we in your pocket. I mean, it's not you. It's not anybody that you might even know.
Think about it. Fossils require rapid burial in order to be preserved. So if you're finding things like
that's why we haven't found all the different species yet that you claim never happened, because we haven't found those species. It's just bizarre.
fossilized ichthyosaurus giving birth?
Oh, he's about ready to say one of the most ridiculous things I've ever freaking heard come out of anybody ever. He's going to ask a stupid question. Now, usually questions aren't stupid, but in this case, it's exceptional.
What that tells you is that it doesn't take 10,000 years to get a fossil, like Darwinists assume. It only takes a few moments in some cases. That would be an awfully long birth if it actually took that long for that fossil to form.
Huh?
You find fossilized schools of fish that are all together. We find fossilized fish eating other fish. Does it take 10,000 plus years to have a meal?
Does it take 10,000 years plus to have a meal? What the hell does that have to do with anything? See why he fascinates me? He's an idiot of the first order.
These organisms were buried so quickly that they were buried in the act of whatever they were doing. You have a school of fish sticking together.
Yes, but why would that have to be, and how could that be proof of a global flood? Localized floods occur, buddy. You know that. Chances are the town you were born in might have faced a flood. Actually, I don't know where you were born. It looks like you're in Arizona.
And they didn't even have time to scatter because they were buried so quickly by the flood of Noah. Number 10, we find cold rock that has been subducted into the hot molten mantle of the earth. And
Cold rock.
this, I would say, is probably the most powerful piece of evidence for Noah's flood.
I can't, for the life of me, see how it's evidence for Noah's flood at all.
How is it that you have cold rock that's 10 miles thick that has been subducted into the molten mantle where you have hot rock all around it? How is that possible if slow and gradual change 1 to 2 inches per year is pulling that rock down into the mantle?
Hey, well, you know, sometimes the material comes up from the center of the earth, like through volcanism, and deposits huge amounts of weight upon the rest of the continent, which has a tendency to make that continent sink in certain areas and possibly even raise up in other areas. I don't know what you're trying to get at.
What it shows us is that in the recent past, the crust of the earth was broken up and pieces of rock were...
He talks about this, and yet he doesn't talk about how things like the Himalayan mountains were formed. I mean, really, he's talking about subduction.
Were going under one another and literally causing mountains to form, as we covered earlier. But then we realized, since they're still cold, that this catastrophe must have happened in the recent past.
What proof do you have of any of that? What are you talking about?
So if you find cold rocks that are in the hot mantle of the earth, and they're from the crust of the earth, they had to have been rapidly subducted. And let me say this.
Well, why? Why do you think they would have to be rapidly subducted? And what makes you think that they are formed of a material that isn't somehow different than the molten rock around it? Have you ever burned a candle?
Too. If something like that happened today, if you had a 10-mile thick piece of rock from the oceanic crust that was broken up and rapidly subducted, we would experience such a globally cataclysmic process.
No. Only if it was happened in an instant, not if it happened gradually over time. Which subduction zones, all they do is create earthquakes from friction. They don't rapidly do much of anything other than perhaps allow for volcanism somehow by making channels for magma, whatever.
Us here, that we would have another global
But again, it has absolutely nothing to do with global flooding.
flood. These are just some facts that I wanted to share with you.
Where? Where are the facts, Matt? You haven't shown us any facts, Matt. You've just talked about stuff that you don't know anything about.
About why we know that Noah was a
Knowledge. Not in this case.
real person, that Adam and Eve were real people, and that you can trust the Bible and what God's Word has told us about.
Yeah, yeah, trust it. Just trust it, because it's, old. It was created before we knew what was happening. So trust it. Trust it to tell you the real truth. Whatever.
Out these things such as geology in the book of Genesis. And I'd like to end with this thought.
Geology and the book of Genesis. And now, let's end with a thought.
Noah was actually warning people, and he was telling everybody, guys, get on the boat. There's going to be a tremendous flood that's going to come to this world, and it's going to destroy the planet. It's going to wreak havoc on the earth. And people laughed at him and they mocked him. We're also warning people, just as Noah did, about a coming judgment. And I believe that the flood of Noah is the story that authenticates the entire Bible.
You've got to be kidding me. You haven't even established that Noah's flood, or that Noah even occurred. There is no ark. There is no way that the ark could have contained that many species. There is no way that the earth was covered completely for 40 days and 40 nights there in water since the 4.3 billion years ago. And yet you're calling it proof of the Bible? Well, Jesus, that's pretty shaky ground there, my friend. Evidently, you've just nullified the entire Bible, which is fine by me. It only contains certain dates when it comes to, like warfare and things like that. It doesn't really. There is no proof of the resurrection of Jesus. There is no proof of the existence of Jesus. None of that even occurred. I mean, we haven't found proof of that yet. Maybe someday we will, but until we do, and until we prove that there was a resurrection, all bets are off, my friend.
If a global flood actually happened and the entire planet was wiped out, what that shows us is that there must have been somebody that built an ark of some sort and protected all of the animal kinds on this sea.
Kinds. Like, you've got to use that word, kinds, because you can't use species, because, well, hell, a species. That's something that's very Darwinian now, isn't it? It's very biblical. Kinds. But it's like English. Like, what the hell are you talking about? It's just English. One of the very many languages that the Bible was translated to and given to even more error than what was originally meant. I mean, look, this book was written like 100 years after the fact, and it's not even written by the same people who say that it was written by, The book of Matthew wasn't written by Matthew. Luke wasn't written by Luke. These people didn't write these things. Other people wrote them down later out of, what could be the tantamount to the game of telephone. A great example of this would be like Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur. Mallory went around and collected different stories of King Arthur and compiled this book. And there was, I forget the other writer too who did it beforehand, but they were nothing but stories, folk tales that were written down. And I think that's what we're looking at. We're not looking at proof by mentioning in the Bible of much of anything. We're just looking at folk tales.
We're the vessel. And what that tells us is, as well, is that God's word is true, that Genesis is actually a historical account of the past, and that you can put your faith in it.
All right, faith. Put your faith in it, because we would not want you to think about the reality of it all. We just want you to believe it through faith, because we can rule you that way very, very easily, because, we know how you should vote.
Faith is defined as a confidence or trust in someone or something. My friend, put your faith in Jesus.
Yeah, why don't you do that? See where it gets you. It's not going to get you very far. It just isn't. Believing in evolution probably won't get you very far either, but at least you'll have a better understanding about what really happened in the world.
Your faith in the Word of God.
Study geology, buddy. Really, study geology. Don't waste your time on this thing that you're wasting your time on, because you're not saving anybody. You're not even helping anybody.
Hey, how you guys doing? Would you guys be willing to sign a petition today? It's basically for, I'll show you here. It's a petition to gender transition my pet, as well as other animals.